Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS current affair analysis for 22nd September 2020, and these are the articles we will be discussing today. So this article is taken from the Hindu and it is titled India and Abraham Accords. So if we take a look at the history from 1947, ever since Israel has been recognized, there has been a conflict between Israel as well as Arab nations. So these Arab nations include Saudi Arabia, UAE and many other countries as well. But on September 15th of this year, something significant happened. It is termed historic. So in USA, that is the White House ceremony, which is the official residence of the President of the United States, the ceremony took place where there was a formal agreement between Israel and United Arab Emirates, which is one of the significant Arab nation in the region. So what this has done is it has formalized and created channels for diplomacy for one of the most conflict ridden and controversial region across the world, that is the Gulf and Middle East. So this accord is formally called Abraham Accord. So is United Arab Emirates the first country to have diplomatic ties with Israel? That is not true. This is the third country. Before this, Egypt as well as Jordan had diplomatic ties with Israel. So in this context, what we are trying to understand is what are the implications for India in this context. Let us try to understand one by one. But before the implications, let us have a look at the sort of conditions that facilitated this friendship. This is very unusual. However, it is not also very surprising given the fact that everyone in the region have certain interests when they partner. For example, UAE and Bahrain, if we talk about them, they don't really have any sort of a border conflict or any land management issue with Israel directly. So, although formally committed to a Arab consensus, so what is this Arab consensus? It is a consensus wherein all the Arab nations arrived at a conclusion that they shall support the two nation theory. So in international parlance, there is a concept called dehyphenation, that is whenever there is a conflict, the countries involved in that conflict will not try to mix up different issues together. So if there is a conflict between the Arab countries and Israel on matters relating to land boundary, they will only talk about land boundary on a specific forum. When they are talking about, say, some common interest like agriculture, they will engage on this aspect of agriculture only. So they work on the aspect of those elements which are convenient and mutually beneficial for their countries. Now UAE and Israel have adopted this stance of a sort of a dehyphenation tendency. India also has this element of dehyphenation in its policy because we also stand for two nation theory. However, we do engage with Israel as well. So what are the implications for India with this Abraham Accord? Firstly, when we are talking about the geopolitics, it is a welcome move that this region will see peace. However, geopolitically, both UAE and Israel are our strategic partners. In general, when we are talking about the Gulf Cooperation Council, the Palestine issue has been one of the most contentious one, and India has been a significant player in ensuring that Arab nations and Israel both continue their talks on the two nation theory. So Israel as well as the new Gulf Cooperation Council ties may have certain adverse impacts also. It might lead to religious fundamentalism in the region, because whenever you look at a society, there are always this fundamental fringe groups associated who might not like this kind of friendship. So the possibility of a southern Gulf becoming the new arena of proxy war between Iran and Israel is very likely. So this will have some sort of an impact on the economy as well as the peace and stability of the region. Also, if you see in the recent times, Iran has been moving closer to China. This is because Iran has been cornered by the economic sanctions imposed by US. So it wants to get away from the US and partnered with China. In this context, we also have to remember that Iran is the gateway for Afghanistan, for India. So when we are talking about the stake in Chabahar port, recently China has also committed to invest in that region. So losing out Iran in this region and the ensuing cooperation between Gulf Cooperation Council and Israel will not give us the kind of leverage we need in this region. So there is every possibility that India might compete with Israel to supply the manpower it requires in the Gulf region. So Israel, just like India, also has a rich pool of talented individuals and skilled workforce who can be very handy in this region, because they also have a proximity to the region and they have an affinity or ability to speak Arabic as well, unlike Indians. So all this will give advantage to Israeli citizens who want to work in the region. So India must take into consideration all this strategic, economic as well as security reasons into consideration and move ahead very carefully. That is the gist of this article. This article titled "A Point of Order" is taken from the Hindu and it is regarding the Farm Bill 2020. So on September 17th, Lok Sabha has passed two contentious agricultural bills, and this is despite the widespread protests from opposition, and it includes even BJP allies as well. So this includes states like Punjab and Haryana which have been protesting the bills. So Union Minister Harisimrat Kaur Badal of Akali Dal resigned from the Narendra Modi government hours ahead of the voting. So the first bill was passed on September 14th, the first day of the Parliament's monsoon session, and all the three bills were replacing the ordinances which were promulgated in June month, exactly to be precise, June 5th. So what are these bills about? What are the details of that? We have already discussed in detail in yesterday's and day before yesterday's articles. So if you haven't watched it, please go back to those articles. Now the central issue that this article is trying to raise is not about the farm bills, but it is about how Rajya Sabha deputy chairman has refused to conduct a division of votes on two controversial pieces of legislation. This sort of a refusal has not happened before, so that has been the concern raised by the opposition members. So the bills in question have been challenged on constitutional and practical grounds. So if we take a look at the rules of procedures regarding the voting, they are not clear. If a voice vote is challenged, will votes be challenged by operating the automatic vote recorder or by the members going into the lobbies? This is the confusion that has arose. So there is a convention that even if a single member demands a division, it is required to be carried out. Generally, voice vote means the members will just raise their hands and say ayes and noes. There is no proper documentation of the voting and there is no actual enumeration of the votes. So the explanation that members were not demanding a division from their seats and the house was not in order is not correct according to the view of this author. So what happened the other day was the deputy chairman has refused to address the concerns raised by the opposition members. So to begin with, the disorder was triggered by the chair's refusal to order a division itself. So there was no documentation of the votes, and consequently what happened was, despite significant amendments being asked by the opposition members, those amendments were not taken into consideration and the bill was passed as it is. So there was no deliberation upon the bills and there was no discussion on it, and even the question hour was taken away. So this is simply unconstitutional according to the writer. Our constitution guarantees rule of law as very much necessary for survival of any kind of democratic institution. Now, Parliament being the highest seat of power, where representatives are meant to uphold the spirit of our constitution, practices like this are not welcome. So the opposition members have petitioned President Ramnath Kovind to not give assent to the two bills. We know that only after President gives his assent, the bills become a act. So, as a consequence of all that has perspired in the Parliament in the last couple of days, we can safely conclude that the onus is on the executive to restore the effective and meaningful function of Parliament. Because Parliament must not take away the rights of members of parliaments to take a stand in debates and votes. That is the reason why instruments like question hour, 0 hour, and division of votes become very important. So, just by using voice votes and other sort of mechanisms which bypass the rule of law should not be encouraged. That is the gist of this article.